Amidst the war, the chaos, the glory, and the decay, Middle-earth always had one thing going for it: natural beauty. There was a lot of wilderness that, while sometimes dangerous, had been undisturbed by people for thousands of years. Some places had even been carefully created or blessed by the Valar themselves. So in this video, I want to do something fun and talk about what I believe are the 7 natural wonders of Middle-earth. Before I start the list, I want to clarify a few things about it. Firstly, it's all subjective, so it's completely fine if you disagree. Secondly, the list isn't in order. It was hard enough to only choose 7 places, so the last thing I wanted to do is to rank them from best to worst. I didn't even think about it. And lastly, while beauty and grandeur obviously plays an important part in my criteria, what's also important is uniqueness. Basically, if there's a place that has nothing else like it in Middle-earth, then that gets it more points. The first place on this list is Keled Zaram, the Mirrormere. The Mirrormere is a long, deep, oval-shaped lake in the Dimril Dale, the valley outside the east gate of Moria. The water is described as completely still, and its dark blue colour is likened to that of a clear evening sky when viewed from a lamplit room. The colour of the lake and the stillness of the water make the Mirrormere act as something of a mirror. The sky and everything around the lake is clearly reflected in the water. We already know what Mirrormere means, but Keled Zaram means glass lake. The Sindarin name is Nen Kenedril, meaning lake-looking glass, and the Quenya name is Angalimpe, meaning mirror. The Mirrormere was an extremely significant place to the dwarves. When Durin the Deathless left Gundabad, he came upon the Mirrormere and looked into the still waters. Above his head, he could see the reflection of the constellation that would later be known as Durin's Crown, and he had a small column built at the location. Seeing this as a good omen, Durin decided to build his capital of Khazad-dûm in the mountains next to the lake. Many years later, Balin of Thorin's company fame would be killed by an orc archer while looking into the Mirrormere, and when the Fellowship escaped Moria, Gimli refused to leave until he had looked into the lake, and he too would also see Durin's crown. Staying on the topic of dwarves, and specifically Durin the Deathless, our second location is Mount Gundabad. Mount Gundabad isn't any regular mountain. Its location, its look, and its history are all fairly unique. Firstly, it's located in close proximity to both the Grey Mountains and the Misty Mountains, yet is part of neither, occupying the centre of a pass that separates Rhovanion and the frozen land of Forodwaith. Secondly, while it's all one mountain, Gundabad is always drawn as having 3 separate major peaks, almost resembling a trident or a 3-headed hydra in mountain form. And if that doesn't make it unique enough, Gundabad was also the place where Durin the Deathless awoke. Although he did not remain there, Gundabad became something of a holy site for the dwarves, and a place of assembly for delegations from the different dwarven clans. Unfortunately, due to its proximity to the north and its strategic location, orcs eventually managed to take the mountain. Apart from a brief period during the War of the Dwarves and Orcs late in the Third Age, they were never expelled, and despite all its majesty, Gundabad remained a dangerous place. My third place is much less known and from a much earlier age. I'm talking about the Gates of Sirion and the cool geography that precedes it. The River Sirion is one of the 2 great rivers of Beleriand. Once it reaches the southern point of Doriath, the powerful river turns into an area of marshes, pools, and creeks known as Aelin Uial. This is a magical place, and not just due to the proximity of the Girdle of Melian, but also because the power of the Valar, Ulmo, ran deeply in these waters. It's at Aelin Uial where Finrod and Turgon would have their dreams that would inspire them to build Nargothrond and Gondolin. But it gets cooler. After Aelin Uial, the Sirion comes together again and drops sharply at a place called the Falls of Sirion. There, the entire river goes underground, carving out a series of caverns beneath the long range of hills known as the Andram. In an earlier draft of Tolkien's work, this cavern was known as the Great Cave of Tumultuous Wind. Finally, the river reaches the Gates of Sirion. This is a large cavern mouth where the Great River bursts back above ground. Unfortunately, no characters visit this place in any of our stories, so better descriptions are not given. But looking at the descriptions that we do have from Aelin Uial to the Falls of Sirion to the Gates of Sirion, I don't think that there was anywhere else like this in Middle-earth. Unfortunately, all of these lands were destroyed during the War of Wrath and sank beneath the waves with the rest of Beleriand. Number 4 is a very familiar location, Lothlorien, the Golden Wood. At the end of the Third Age, Lothlorien is described as one of the most elvish and most beautiful places in Middle-earth. Situated on both sides of the river Celebrant, Lothlorien is a large forest which also contains a number of hills. The forest is called the Golden Wood because it was the only place in Middle-earth where one could find Malon trees. These were giant trees with silver bark and leaves that were green and silver in spring and summer, but turned to gold in autumn and winter, hence the Golden Wood. In the heights of these trees, elves would build flets, which could function as watchposts but also as homes. I will admit, having Lothlorien on this list is cheating a little bit, because Malon trees were not native to Lothlorien. They could originally only be found in Valinor and then in Numenor. The Malon trees that could eventually be found in Lothlorien were originally a gift from Tar Eldarion of Numenor to Gil-galad, who then gave them to Galadriel. When she introduced the trees to Lothlorien is unknown. It might have been when she dwelt there in the Second Age, or when she took over the rule of the country in the Third Age. Before this, Lothlorien, or Lindorinand, was still beautiful, but did not have the same unearthly beauty it would later achieve. My fifth location is Aglarond, Glittering Caves, the network of caves that could be found behind the fortress of Helm's Deep. The Glittering Caves were a natural formation of caves that extended deep under the mountain of Three-Hörna in the White Mountains. Well, the word caves, according to Gimli, does no justice to this place. He describes it as the most beautiful place he has ever seen. The polished walls glint with gems, crystals, and veins of precious metals. There are stone columns of white, saffron, and dawn rose, and at their peak are dark pools that resemble clear glass. He calls it a marvel of the northern world, and says that not even Durin could have imagined such a place. Gimli also says that if the dwarves knew about such a place, there would be an endless pilgrimage of them just to gaze at the caves, even if it meant paying a hefty price. They wouldn't even want to mine the Glittering Caves. Gimli says that dwarves wouldn't dare to harm such a place, even if gold and diamonds could be found. Legolas is unmoved, but promises to visit them when the war is over. He eventually does, and is left speechless. In the Fourth Age, Gimli would return to the Glittering Caves and start a dwarf colony there. All I'm going to say is that if Gimli, who had spent his life in the Blue Mountains, Erebor, and had even visited Khazad-dûm, if he spends paragraphs talking about how amazing a place is, then it must have been something. The sixth place on the list is the Falls of Rauros, or commonly just shorted to Rauros. The Falls of Rauros, as the name might suggest, is simply a giant waterfall. Nothing else comes close in Middle-earth as far as we know. The rush and thunder of the falls is enough to shake the windless air, and the golden haze of the waterfall's fumes can be seen rising even above the waterfall itself. The volume of water going over the falls was so great that vast marshlands formed beneath them, such as Nindalf and the mouths of the Entwash. That said, one could row fairly close to the edge of the falls and not be guaranteed to be swept over them, and, inexplicably, boats containing dead Boromirs could survive the plummet. In a way, the Falls of Rauros acted as something of a barrier between the north and south of the Westlands, because Rauros made it completely impossible to sail a boat from the source of the Anduin to the mouths of the Anduin. This seemingly frustrated the kings of Gondor, who for all their might, were still at the mercy of the giant waterfall, so they cut a stairway called the North Stair into the eastern side of the falls, which would allow for small boats to be carried up from the base of the waterfall to the lake of Nen Hithol before it. This was the path that the Fellowship was planning on taking before they split up. A last location is also from the First Age. This is Ithel Ivrin, or the Pools of Ivrin. The Pools of Ivrin were located on the southern side of the Ered Weathrin, and were a series of pools that could be found in a stone basin that was surrounded by trees. The pools also acted as the source for the river Narog, one of Beleriand's larger rivers that flowed through Nargothrond, and eventually into the Sirion. Although a beautiful place by itself, Ivrin's beauty was enhanced by the fact that the waters were magically blessed by Ulmo. It was something of a Middle-earth equivalent of the Fountain of Youth. It was the location of the Mereth Adethad, the Feast of Reuniting that helped heal the rifts in the Noldor. It was visited by Finrod and Beren, and then by Gwyndor and Turin. The latter drank the waters there and was healed of his grief and madness. Unfortunately, the Pools of Ivrin would suffer a sad fate. Glaurung, Morgoth's first dragon, purposefully travelled to Ivrin and destroyed the place, knocking down all of the trees, defiling the waters, and he broke the stone basin that held them. When Turin travelled to the pools a second time, he found the water defiled and frozen, and that the lands around the pools had become a barren marsh. Ivrin's beauty was never restored, and perhaps, mercifully, The remainder of the pools sank with the rest of Beleriand. And that's it. That is my list of Middle-earth's 7 natural wonders. We have a lake, a pool, a forest, a mountain, a waterfall, an underground river, and a series of caves. One honourable mention is the Valley of Tumladen, where Gondolin was built. The valley itself was beautiful, but the true wonder is how the encircling mountains truly encircled the valley. A few other candidates I considered were the Karok, Mount Doom, the Enchanted River, and Fangorn, but for one reason or several I didn't include them on the list. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it or at least found it interesting. Do you have any disagreements? Feel free to let me know. Do you have a list of your own? I want you to write it in the comments. That way we can do the classic internet thing of arguing with each other and then refusing to accept each other's viewpoints. I'm joking, we're all civil here. If you're wondering, yeah, I probably will do a regular 7 Wonders video. Cheers, farewell, and remember, according to Gandalf, the 8th natural wonder is Peregrine Took's foolishness.